My favorite Fortnite character is Bart Simpson in a robot suit. This week, Bloomberg published a hot article that connects all of the dots of Xbox's recent problems with one taut red string. The multi-platform releases, the cancellations, the Game Pass price increases, the dev kit price increases, the general unwarranted smarminess that could only barely conceal the true desperation, all tied back to a mandate to achieve 30% profit margins. Considering that most of what I do here is just talk about Xbox, we should probably talk about that article, right? No, not today. You know why? Much more importantly, this week, Masahiro Sakurai dropped Kirby Air Riders Direct number 2. An absolute clinic of deep dive showcasing that clocks in at 1 hour and 2 minutes and 20 seconds.
長くない?
On several occasions now, I've spoken highly about Masahiro Sakurai's comprehensive series, Masahiro Sakurai on Creating Games. And it still holds up as a fun, entry-level game design resource. One thing I love about it is that when Sakurai says you in these videos, he's talking to you, the game developer. As in, if you are having a hard time balancing the difficulty in your game, you could try playing one-handed. That could help. But he's not saying we. He's not closing the door on you and talking about him and his buddies. He doesn't say we make the game easier than we think it should be and it'll be just right. He says you. He's including you, and I think that's a special part of that series. And previously, when you'd watch these videos, you'd kind of gain perspective on design decisions he's made in the past. But now, for the first time, we're watching Masahiro Sakurai pitch a brand new game after he's revealed all of his secrets. I'd say it's like watching a Penn and Teller act, where you're watching this thing and you're not sure why the magic trick is that impressive. It seems kind of normal. Teller's bouncing a bagel. Why is this magic? But then Penn and Teller will do this thing where they show you how they did their magic trick, and it doesn't ruin it. In fact, it's more fun now. It's more impressive now. You think, wait a minute, he could have dropped that bagel and it would have ruined the whole thing. And that's what's changed with Sakurai now. We've got this whole database. We know how he does his tricks. Now when he's saying you, he's talking to you, the general audience. Some of whom may have even enjoyed the music from the original Kirby Air Rider. I appreciate that awareness. He doesn't say most of you or even a bunch of you. He says some of you, which I feel is realistic. Anyway, considering this, I was particularly perked up and interested when he introduced a brand new game mode, Road Trip. Seconds into the explanation of Road Trip, it occurs to you you're probably looking at a roguelike mode. And if I may, once again, I would like to point out that Masahiro Sakurai agrees there's really no need for the word roguelite. Roguelite it's a dumb word. It's not really servicing anyone. But now that we've seen Masahiro Sakurai create a roguelike mode, we can go back into the archives and we can see what his takes on roguelikes are. What's funny, at one point he talked about how roguelikes work well for indies because they don't require as many unique assets. Now, to be clear, if you're a YouTuber like myself, you cannot say something like that. That it's smart for a developer to choose a roguelike genre because it's a cheaper use of assets. However, we allow it from Masahiro Sakurai because of his expertise. And yeah, looking back at Road Trip, some of the elements do seem maybe a little in the realm of an indie budget. But then, for some reason, also, Road Trip is the mode that all of this beautiful CG was made for. Again, you're just looking at it like a Kirby racing game here. Why would they waste all that money? What is Masahiro Sakurai thinking? Nice thing is, he's already told us what he's thinking. If you're making a roguelike, you, the game designer, you have to show the player something to look forward to. Right, look at that guy. That's this guy. Same guy. Abracadabra. Now you're invested in continuing to lose and grind at the roguelike mode. Another quick aside that I'm a little embarrassed about. So last month, I made a video about how one must trust Silksong to continue playing it. Well, I watched more of that video I was just showing you, and I feel so dumb because Sakurai says, in games like Dark Souls, players press on due to their strong desire to reach what's next. For some people, this feeling is built upon the trust they have in From Software or Mr. Miyazaki himself. So yeah, my whole thesis there kind of verges on plagiarism. It's hard to tell at this point if this entire YouTube channel is perhaps just me regurgitating sentences Masahiro Sakurai said one time and then adding a honk to it. Squeeze and release. But at one point in this direct, I think he may have tipped his hand a little too much. Something stood out to me. He's showing this checklist grid, right? And we say, of course, you talked about how you introduced that in Kirby Air Ride. That was file N06. Yeah, you did that before achievements and trophies, we remember. But this modern checklist grid has a cool new feature. Where, let's say a challenge is very specific, like win against a level 5 or higher CPU rider with Rick in Top Ride Cave. What's cool is you can just click it. You can skip straight to playing that specific setup instead of menuing back out and then hoping that you remember to set up everything after that. Like, do you remember what the challenge was? Right now, do you remember what I just said? Something about Rick for sure, but otherwise, no, I'm going to have to read that sentence again. But I think that's smart. I think that shows an important willingness to rethink something that was successful in the past, but maybe you could do slightly better today. Now, there's another new feature of this new era checklist, and that is difficulty sliders. So let's say you got to go through this hall of lasers with 7 other obnoxious, bouncy Kirby characters knocking you around. And you lose if you bump into one of those beams. That's annoying, right? That'll clearly be annoying. You will get bumped. However, it's not really a problem. You can make it slow. You could bump the number of riders down to 1. That's just you. Sakurai says challenging them directly is also good, but you can make things easier for yourself. He says that's a stroke of player genius. That right there is the difference. That's the difference between Sakurai talking to you, the game developer, and you, the dumb player, who might quit if it gets too hard. Is it a stroke of genius to nullify the difficulty of a laser challenge? Or is this what we learned about in that video titled Better Than Not Being Able to Beat the Game? In fact, you do get the sense throughout the whole Creating Games series that you're looking at someone who has maybe softened his whole beliefs on video game difficulty. There was a whole video about how he thought that the Fiend's Cauldron from Kid Icarus Uprising was a sweet idea that just didn't fully work. And at one point, he just says, games today generally let you change the difficulty whenever you want, with no restrictions for doing so. Obviously, it's a necessary feature, and I do think it's how it should work. Get ready for a but part of me wishes players could be rewarded for strong play. So it kind of seems like he saw the winds of change on video game difficulty and caved on Kirby Air Riders. And personally, yeah, I will not be challenging 7 other Kirbys in the laser room. I will happily knock that difficulty down to 0. And there's one other final thing that I think is interesting about Kirby Air Riders in particular. It's content rich. And on top of that, it's a fully featured online game. I mean, look, it's got lobbies. You could definitely see this game living for a long time as a service game, except that, nope, there will be no DLC. There will be no sequel. That's it. That's everything. You're looking at the whole game. Sakurai hopes you don't miss out on this opportunity. Just reminds me of a time long gone. It used to be that a game came out and that was it. So we know he knows we're looking at a bit of an old-fashioned strategy. Unconventional in its completeness. Truly, it seems as though Kirby Air Riders, as simple as it might appear, is designed entirely around the mission of holding nothing back. Yeah, it costs the same amount of US dollars as Ghost of Yotei and Battlefield 6 and doesn't look close to those games, but at the same time, it does feel refreshingly unrestrained in that you can't think of a thing that should be in this game that isn't there. They put gummies in this. Pointless gummies you can just accrue and squish around for fun, and they don't serve any functional purpose beyond that. Just seems like Kirby Air Riders is designed with low business sense. Just seems like the mission with this game is not to rake in billions, because it definitely won't, but just to launch a fun, complete video game. Complete after the day 1 patch, but still. You know, I was actually reading about this one company where developers were largely told to focus on making the best games possible without worrying too much about finances. Sadly, apparently what happened to that corporation is that they purchased this whole other video game publisher for around $69 billion. And that reportedly added more scrutiny to everyone. And rather quickly, it became the scenario where developers were saying we're understaffed, this mechanic is difficult to implement, and we don't have enough time. Somehow, before you knew it, the Forza Motorsport franchise is just gone. You know what Masahiro Sakurai would say in a situation like that?
それ、プレイヤーに事情を説明して回るつもりなの。
Not just in speech, but apparently in action. He seems to truly live by the player coming first, which is why, with all my heart, I believe it when he calls me a genius for turning down the difficulty. And that, my dear geniuses, is delayed input. I'll be back next week. Until then, thanks for watching. Now, I realize it may have been a bit jarring that I've been so nice to Kirby Air Riders this whole video when in the past I may have said things like this. For instance, I think Kirby Air Riders looks like a dumb mess. Like somebody took the free used baby toys box at a garage sale and just started shaking it violently. Now, I still think that was a fair analogy. I stand by it. However, we learned more this week, and something interesting. Considering Sakurai is maybe the only voice working on a Nintendo-published product that seems remotely aware of accessibility options, Kirby Air Riders seems to contain a ridiculously generous amount of specifically camera chill-out options. It looks like you can simply just ask the game to stop shaking the toy box so much. You can, with just a few clicks, put your hand on their wrist and say, I would prefer if you don't do that. Nintendo games don't do that kind of thing. It just proves that there's an incredible amount of thought put into every facet of Kirby Air Riders. However, there's one more thing that I did want to say. It's something that I just feel like needs to be said. There needs to be a record of at least one person admitting that this guy, Chef Kawasaki, is not worthy of this table. If you've got a list of top 5 Kirby characters and that guy is on it, you're lying to me. And you're lying to yourself. Rick is right there. Don't get me wrong. I love the freedom that Nintendo gives Masahiro Sakurai. He's earned it. Nobody else gets to have a 2-part mega epic Nintendo Direct specialized for their game because nobody else could do this. What I'm saying is that if Masahiro Sakurai worked for PlayStation or heaven forbid Xbox, Chef Kawasaki would be the first to go.